Hashtag when everyone turned their backs, human Dreadworlders stepped in the emergency beacon pierced through the cosmic void like a dying star's last scream. On the bridge of the Galactic Council rescue vessel Harmony's voice, Captain Zex, 9 of the Altarian Republic, watched the distress signal flash red across his holographic display. His 4 eyes narrowed as he read the coordinates. Kepler, 442b, he muttered, his translator converting the clicks and whistles of his native tongue into standard galactic common. The mining colony. His first officer, a tall Centaurian with skin like polished chrome, leaned over the navigation console. Captain, that's in the outer rim. Deep space territory. The journey would take us 3 standard cycles. Zex-9's mandibles clicked in annoyance. 3 cycles? For a mining operation? He pulled up the colony's file on his personal display. Kepler, 442b was a small research and mining outpost, home to approximately 15,000 beings from 12 different species. They had been extracting rare quantum crystals from the planet's core, crystals essential for faster-than-light travel. The distress message began to play through the bridge speakers. A voice heavily distorted by static and what sounded like explosions in the background crackled through. This is Director Vash of Kepler, 442b mining colony. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. Our defensive systems have been compromised. Requesting immediate assistance from any Galactic Council vessels in the area. We have civilians, including younglings. Please respond. Please. The message cut off into static. Commander Thale, a reptilian being from the Draconis system, hissed softly. Unknown hostiles in the outer rim. Could be pirates, could be worse. Zex, 9 stood from his command chair, his exoskeleton gleaming under the bridge's blue lighting. At 2 meters tall, he cut an imposing figure among his crew. Get me a communication link to the other council vessels in this sector. Within minutes, holographic projections of 5 other ship captains materialized around the bridge. Captain Illa of the Vegan Collective, Admiral Core of the Andromedan Fleet, Captain Nexus of the Silicon Brotherhood, Commander Wrath of the Crystalline Union, and Captain Vel of the Aquarian Depths. You've all received a distress call from Kepler, 442b. Zex, 9 began without preamble. I'm calling for a coordinated rescue mission. Captain Illa, her blue skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns, spoke first. Captain Zex, 9, with respect, Kepler, 442b is far outside our normal patrol routes. The resources required for such a mission would be enormous. Admiral Core, his metallic features reflecting the light from his own ship's bridge, nodded in agreement. The Andromedan Fleet has commitments closer to home. We cannot spare vessels for what might be a false alarm. False alarm. Zex-9's voice rose. Did you not hear the distress call? There are civilians under attack. Captain Nexus, his crystalline form refracting light in rainbow patterns, spoke in a voice like grinding stone. The Silicon Brotherhood calculates a 67% probability that this is a trap by pirates to lure council vessels into an ambush. The risk outweighs the potential benefit. Commander Wrath of the Crystalline Union added, our energy reserves are depleted from the recent conflicts in the inner systems. We simply do not have the power for such an extended mission. Captain Vel's aquatic form wavered in her water-filled command chamber. The Aquarian Depths concur. Our bioships are not designed for such long-range operations in the void. One by one, each captain offered excuses. Too far. Too dangerous. Too expensive. Not their responsibility. Zex, 9 felt his belief in the Galactic Council wavering with each refusal. So we abandon them? He asked, his voice barely controlled. 15,000 beings, and we turn our backs because it's inconvenient. It's not about convenience, Admiral Core replied coldly. It's about strategic resource allocation. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. The holographic projections faded one by one as each captain signed off. Zex, 9 stood alone on his bridge, staring at the star map showing Kepler, 442b's location, a tiny blinking in the vast darkness of space. Captain, his communications officer, a young Altarian named Kix, 7, spoke hesitantly. There is one response to the distress call. From whom? The human dreadnought Defiant Dawn. Captain Sarachun is requesting permission to speak with you. Zex, 9 paused. Umans. The newest members of the Galactic Council, barely 50 standard years since first contact. Most species still consider them primitives, barely evolved beyond their violent tribal nature. Their homeworld, Earth, was classified as a Class X death world, so dangerous that most civilized beings couldn't survive there for more than a few hours without extensive life support. But their ships were something else entirely. Built like fortresses, designed for war rather than exploration. The other council members tolerated them because human military technology had proved surprisingly effective, but few trusted them completely. "Put her through," Zex 9 ordered. The holographic form of Captain Sarah Chun materialized on the bridge. She was tall for a human, with short dark hair and piercing green eyes. Her uniform was practical, military cut, bearing the insignia of the Terran Defense Force. Behind her, Zex 9 could see the utilitarian bridge of a human warship, all metal and functionality with no aesthetic considerations. "Captain Zex 9, Chin said, her voice carrying a slight accent that the translator couldn't quite smooth out. "I've been monitoring council communications regarding Kepler 442b. I understand the other fleets have declined to respond." "That is correct, Captain Chun. The mission is deemed too costly and dangerous." Chin's expression darkened. 15,000 civilians under attack, and it's too costly? She shook her head. "Captain, the Defiant Dawn is already changing course for Kepler 442b. We'll be there in 36 hours. Zex 9 was stunned. 36 hours? "Captain, that's impossible. Even our fastest ships would require 3 cycles to reach that distance. Human slipspace drives operate differently than Council FTL technology," Chen explained. "We can sustain higher speeds for longer periods, though it's rough on the crew." "Captain Chun, you understand that you'll be going in alone? Without Council support?" Chen's smile was grim. "Wouldn't be the first time humans stood alone, Captain. But I'm hoping you might reconsider. Your ship is fast, and we could use the support." Zex 9 looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for his decision. He thought about the other captains, their calculated refusals, their careful consideration of cost versus benefit. Then he thought about 15,000 beings, possibly dying while they debated logistics. "Captain Chun," he said finally, "the Harmony's voice will accompany you to Kepler 442b. Chen nodded approvingly. "Good. I'll transmit our flight plan and tactical assessments. Captain, I should warn you, if this is a trap or if we encounter significant hostile forces, human combat doctrine is aggressive." "How aggressive?" "We don't retreat. Ever. My species evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned that sometimes the only way through hell is straight through the middle." The connection ended, leaving Zex 9 alone with his thoughts. He had just committed his ship and crew to following humans into what could be a suicide mission. But for the first time in his career, he felt like he was doing something that truly mattered. "Commander Thale," he ordered, "set course for Kepler 442b. Maximum speed." "Yes, sir." "And Captain, for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice." As the Harmony's voice changed course toward the unknown, Zex 9 wondered if he would live to regret this decision. But one thing was certain. They would find out what happened when everyone else turned their backs, but humans stepped forward. The human slipspace drive lived up to its reputation for being rough on passengers. Captain Zex 9 gripped his command chair as the Harmony's voice struggled to keep pace with the Defiant Dawn through the twisted dimensions of human FTL travel. His crew worked steadily at their stations, but he could see the strain on their faces as the ship bucked and shuddered through space-time. "Captain," Communications Officer Kix 7 called out, "Incoming transmission from the human vessel." Captain Chen's hologram appeared, and Zex 9 noticed she looked perfectly comfortable despite the violent motion of slipspace travel. "Captain Zex 9, we're approaching the Kepler 442b system. Sensors are picking up multiple energy signatures." "What kind of signatures?" Chen's expression was grim. "Weapons signatures. Big ones. And, Captain, there are at least 12 ships in orbit around the planet. They're not in our databases." Commander Thale leaned forward from his station. 12 ships? "Captain, we have only 2 vessels. This could be a massacre." Chen must have heard the comment, because she addressed it directly. "Commander, 12 ships isn't impossible odds. It's just Tuesday, for human military doctrine. Captain Zex, 9, are you familiar with human naval history? Only basic information from the Council databases. On our homeworld, we had an ocean that covered 70% of the surface. For thousands of years, we fought wars on that ocean. We learned that sometimes a smaller, more determined force can defeat a larger one through superior tactics and sheer refusal to give up. Chun paused, studying something off-screen. We're dropping out of slip space in 30 seconds. I'm sending you our battle plan. Humans have a saying, the best defense is a good offense. These raiders are probably used to easy targets, running away, or surrendering. They won't expect 2 ships to attack 12. The ships dropped out of FDL simultaneously, and Zex, 9 immediately understood why the other council captains had been reluctant to respond. Kepler, 442b hung in space like a wounded animal, its mining stations burning bright orange against the darkness. Around it, 12 massive vessels moved in predatory patterns. Unknown ship configurations, reported as sensor operator, a 3-eyed being from the Rigel system. They appear to be heavily armed, converted cargo vessels. Pirate modifications. Captain, Chen's voice came through the comm. We need to move fast. Those ships are bombarding the planet's surface. Every minute we wait, more civilians die. Captain Chun, we need a moment to analyze their formations and, with respect, Captain, analysis is a luxury we don't have. Chen's image leaned forward. Human tactical doctrine is built around speed and aggression. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we don't give them time to coordinate a response. Before Zex, 9 could respond, the Defiant Dawn was already accelerating toward the enemy fleet. He watched in amazement as the human dreadnought charged straight at odds of 6 to 1 without hesitation. All hands, battle stations, Zex, 9 ordered. Follow the humans. Maximum acceleration. The lead pirate ship was 3 times larger than the Defiant Dawn, its hull bristling with weapon ports and armor plating. As the human ship approached, it opened fire with everything it had. Energy beams and projectile weapons filled the space between them with deadly light. But something impossible happened. The Defiant Dawn didn't try to dodge. Instead, it flew straight through the barrage, its shields absorbing hit after hit, and returned fire with weapons that made the pirate guns look like toys. My gods, whispered Commander Thale. Look at those weapon yields. The human ship's main guns fired, and the lead pirate vessel simply disappeared. One moment it was there, the next it was expanding debris and superheated plasma. Humans build their weapons to kill things that are already trying very hard to kill them. Chen's voice came over the comm, calm despite the chaos around her. On Earth, we call this proportional response. The pirate fleet, suddenly, missing their lead ship, began to scatter in panic. But the humans weren't done. The Defiant Dawn pivoted with impossible speed for such a large vessel, and engaged its next target. Captain, Zex-9's weapons officer called out, the humans are using some kind of gravitational weapon. It's crushing that pirate ship from the inside. Zex-9 watched in horrified fascination as a pirate vessel the size of a small city began collapsing in on itself, its hull crumpling like paper. Within seconds, it was a ball of twisted metal and screaming atmosphere. Artificial gravity manipulation, Chun explained over the comm. We figured out how to weaponize our gravity generators. Useful for creating black holes inside enemy ships. 3 more pirate ships tried to flee, but the Defiant Dawn launched what looked like simple missiles. When they impacted, each missile somehow opened a hole in space itself, and the fleeing ships were pulled into the void and vanished. Space-time torpedoes, Chun continued conversationally. They open temporary wormholes that lead nowhere. We're still working on making them lead somewhere useful. By now, the remaining pirate ships had realized they were facing something far beyond their understanding. They began transmitting surrender signals, but Chen's response was immediate and final. No quarter for those who target civilians. The battle was over in less than 20 minutes. 12 pirate ships had been reduced to debris fields and gravitational anomalies. The Defiant Dawn hung in space above Kepler, 442b, barely scratched despite facing 6 to 1 odds. Captain Zex, 9, Chen's voice came through the comm. Are you reading life signs from the planet? Zex-9's crew was working frantically at their stations. Yes, Captain Chun. multiple life signs from the underground shelters. It appears most of the colonists survived by retreating to the mining tunnels when the attack began. Good. My Marines are preparing for surface deployment to secure the area and assist with rescue operations. Marines, human ground forces. Captain, you might want to prepare your crew for what they're about to see. Human soldiers are different from other species' military forces. 20 minutes later, Zex, 9 watched through his ship's external cameras as human transport pods descended toward the planet's surface. Each pod was larger than most species' entire assault vehicles, and when they landed, the things that emerged made Zex, 9 question everything he thought he knew about humans. The human Marines were enormous, standing nearly 3 meters tall in their powered armor. They moved with mechanical precision, carrying weapons that looked like they could level buildings. But what struck Zex 9 most was their behavior. They didn't secure the area first or establish defensive positions. Instead, they immediately began moving toward the areas where life signs were strongest, prioritizing rescue over security. Captain Chun, Zex, 9 transmitted, your Marines appear to be exposing themselves to unnecessary risk by prioritizing civilian rescue over tactical positioning. Chen's response was immediate. Captain, human military doctrine has one absolute rule. Civilians come first. Always. We can accept casualties among ourselves, but we will never accept casualties among those we're sworn to protect. Through his sensors, Zex, 9 watched human Marines using their own powered armor to shore up collapsed tunnels, carrying injured colonists to safety, and distributing emergency supplies. One Marine used his armor's built-in medical bay to perform emergency surgery on a wounded Centaurian child. These beings, Commander Thale said quietly, they're not what the Council databases describe. No, Zex, 9 agreed, watching a human Marine give his own emergency rations to a family of hungry Altarians. There's something else entirely. As rescue operations continued, Zex, 9 began to understand why the humans had been so confident about facing impossible odds. They weren't just warriors, they were protectors. And on their death world, they had learned that sometimes the only way to protect what mattered was to become something that could face any threat. For the first time since joining the Galactic Council, Zex, 9 wondered if the other species had been wrong about humans. Maybe being from a death world wasn't a disadvantage. Maybe it was exactly what the galaxy needed. The rescue operations on Kepler 442b took 3 standard days, and Captain Zex, 9 spent every hour of them reconsidering everything he thought he knew about humanity. He watched human Marines work 18-hour shifts without complaint, sharing their food with hungry colonists, and using their advanced medical equipment to treat injuries that would have been fatal without intervention. Director Vash, the Centaurian who had sent the original distress call, was finally brought aboard the Harmony's Voice for debriefing. His chrome-like skin was dulled with exhaustion and stress, but his eyes were bright with gratitude. Captain Zex, 9, Vash said, settling into the chair across from the captain's desk, I must ask you something that has been troubling me. Why did the humans respond so quickly? The attack began only 4 days ago, yet they were here within hours of our distress signal. Zex, 9 leaned back in his chair. I've been wondering the same thing. Captain Chun, would you care to explain? Captain Chen's hologram appeared beside Director Vash. Even in projection, she carried an aura of competence that was somehow reassuring. Director Vash, the Terran Defense Force has been monitoring pirate activity in this sector for the past 6 months. We knew something like this was coming. You knew. Vash's voice rose in surprise. Then, why didn't the Galactic Council receive any warnings? Chen's expression darkened slightly. We submitted intelligence reports to the Council 3 times. Each time, we were told that the threat assessment was exaggerated and that human intelligence was unreliable due to our aggressive nature and tendency to see threats where none exist. Zex, 9 felt his mandibles click in embarrassment. He remembered those reports now. They had been dismissed during council meetings as human paranoia, another example of how their death world origins made them unsuitable for civilized galactic politics. The pirates who attacked you, Chun continued, call themselves the Crimson Fleet. They've been raiding Outer Rim colonies for 2 years, always targeting isolated settlements that can't defend themselves. Their pattern was predictable to anyone who bothered to look. Director Vash stared at her hologram. You mean this attack could have been prevented? Easily. A single patrol ship in this sector would have been enough to deter them. The Crimson Fleet only attacks soft targets. Chen paused, her green eyes hardening. But prevention would have required the Council to take human intelligence seriously. Captain Chun, Zex, Nine said carefully, I owe you an apology. The Council, we have not treated humanity fairly. Chen shrugged. Captain, we're used to it. Every species goes through the same process when they first encounter humans. First, they think we're primitive barbarians. Then they see our technology and decide we're dangerous barbarians. It usually takes a crisis before they realize we're actually just people who happen to be very good at protecting things we care about. Over the next few hours, as the rescued colonists were transferred to the Council vessel for transport to safe harbors, Zex, Nine learned more about human society than he had in 5 years of reading Council intelligence reports. Dr. Sarah Kim, the chief medical officer of the Defiant Dawn, came aboard to assist with treating the wounded. She was small even by human standards, barely reaching Zex Nine's chest, but she moved through the medical bay with absolute authority. Dr. Zex, Nine asked, watching her perform surgery on a badly injured Aquarian. Your medical knowledge appears to exceed our own in several areas. How is this possible? Humans have only been in space for 50 years. Dr. Kim didn't look up from her patient. Captain, humans have been practicing emergency medicine under combat conditions for thousands of years. When your species evolves on a death world, you either get very good at fixing injuries very quickly, or you don't survive. But this equipment, Zex, Nine gestured to the medical devices she was using. Some of it appears to be more advanced than Council technology. Necessity breeds innovation, Dr. Kim replied, finally, looking up from her work. On Earth, we deal with injuries that would kill most species instantly. Massive trauma, organ failure, genetic damage from radiation exposure. We had to develop medical technology that could handle the impossible. She gestured to a device that was regenerating damaged tissue on the Aquarian's gill slits. This cellular regenerator was originally designed to treat radiation poisoning from nuclear accidents. It turns out it's also very good at healing injuries from energy weapons. Commander Thale, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Doctor, if I may ask, what is life like on Earth? The Council databases classify it as uninhabitable for most species. Dr. Kim smiled for the first time since arriving. Earth is beautiful, Commander. Yes, it's dangerous. We have predators that can kill with a single bite, weather systems that can level cities, and natural disasters that happen without warning. But it's also the most alive place in the universe. She activated a holographic display showing images of Earth. Zex, Nine watched in fascination as scenes of incredible beauty and terrible danger played across the screen. Vast oceans full of creatures larger than starships. Mountains that scrape the sky. Storms that could power entire civilizations. Every human carries Earth with them, Dr. Kim continued. We're protective because we know what it's like to lose everything to forces beyond our control. We're aggressive because sometimes aggression is the only thing that keeps you alive. And we're stubborn because giving up means death. But surely, Zex, Nine said, living in such conditions must create a violent, unstable society. Dr. Kim's laugh was musical. Captain, Earth taught us that violence without purpose is wasteful. We learned to fight when necessary and protect when possible. Our societies are actually quite peaceful by Death World standards. Chief Engineer Martinez from the Defiant Dawn joined the conversation, having come aboard to help repair damage to the mining colony's infrastructure. He was a massive human, even by their standards, with hands that could crush most species' bones, but moved with surprising gentleness when working with delicate equipment. Chief Martinez, Zex, Nine asked, your ship's weapons and defenses far exceed anything in the Council databases. How do humans develop such advanced military technology? Martinez looked up from the power coupling he was repairing. Captain, human engineering is based on a simple principle. If it can break, it will break, and usually at the worst possible moment. So we build everything to survive the worst-case scenario. He gestured toward the human dreadnought visible through the medical bay's viewport. The Defiant Dawn is designed to fight while being torn apart. Her weapons can operate even if the main power systems fail. Her armor can absorb hits that would vaporize most ships. And if all else fails, she can ram through enemy formations and keep fighting. Ram through enemy formations? Human ships are built for ramming, Captain. Sometimes the best way through an enemy fleet is straight through it. We learned a long time ago that if you make yourself scary enough, most threats will try to avoid you instead of fighting you. Director Vash had been listening to all of this with growing amazement. Captain Chun, he said finally, I must ask, why did humans join the Galactic Council? With your technology and capabilities, you could have simply conquered the galaxy. Chin's image turned to look at him directly. Director, conquest was never the goal. Humans joined the Council because we believe that different species working together are stronger than any one species alone. We've seen what happens when civilizations turn inward and only care about themselves. She paused, her expression becoming distant. On Earth, we had hundreds of different nations and cultures. For most of our history, we fought each other over resources and territory. But when we finally learned to work together, to see beyond our differences and focus on our common goals, we achieved things that were impossible for any single nation. Space travel, Dr. Kim added. Nuclear fusion, the cure for genetic diseases. All of these came from international cooperation. But, Zex, 9 said slowly, the other council members see humans as dangerous. Your military capabilities make them nervous. And they should be nervous, Martinez said bluntly. Not because we're going to attack them, but because they've forgotten what they're supposed to be protecting. The council has become focused on politics and economics instead of protecting the beings they represent. Chen nodded. Captain Zex 9, can I ask you something? When you received the distress call from Kepler 442b, what was the first thing the other captains talked about? Zex 9 thought back to that conversation. Cost, distance, risk assessment, resource allocation. Exactly. They calculated whether it was profitable to save 15,000 lives. That's not civilization, Captain. That's accounting. As the conversations continued through the night cycle, Zex 9 began to understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their combat abilities. It was their refusal to accept that some lives were worth more than others, that some people were too far away to matter, that some fights were too expensive to fight. They had learned, on their death world, Park was young for a human, barely 30 standard years, but he moved through the warship's corridors with the confidence of someone who had seen real combat. Commander Park, Zex 9 asked, examining the ship's internal architecture, why are human ships designed so differently from council vessels? Park gestured to the reinforced bulkheads and redundant systems visible through the corridor's transparent sections. Captain, council ships are designed for exploration and peaceful contact. Human ships are designed for the possibility that everything will go wrong simultaneously. They paused at an observation deck that looked out over the ship's main hangar. Zex 9 watched human technicians maintaining their fighter craft and noticed something unusual. Your maintenance crews work without protective equipment in areas that should be hazardous. Humans are remarkably hard to kill, Park said with a slight smile. Our home world has an electromagnetic field, ionizing radiation, corrosive atmosphere in some regions, and seasonal variations that would be lethal to most species. We evolved to handle environmental hazards that would require extensive life support for other races. As they walked, Zex 9 noticed other differences. Human crew members were larger and stronger than their council counterparts, but they also moved more efficiently in a ship's artificial gravity. Their reaction times were faster, their coordination more precise. Commander, Zex 9 said, I've reviewed human military history from the council databases. Your species seems to have an unusual approach to warfare. Park paused at a tactical display showing human battle formations. What do you mean, Captain? Most civilized species view warfare as a necessary evil, something to be avoided when possible and concluded quickly when unavoidable. Humans seem to embrace it. Park's expression became serious. Captain, humans don't embrace warfare. We embrace the idea that some things are worth fighting for, even if the fight is hopeless. On Earth, we learned that predators respect strength, but they respect determination even more. He activated the tactical display, showing historical human conflicts. Look at these battles, Captain. Thermopylae, where 300 humans held off an army of hundreds of thousands. The Warsaw Ghetto, where civilians fought against impossible odds rather than submit to genocide. The Battle of Britain, where a small air force defeated a much larger invasion fleet. Zex 9 studied the tactical data. These battles were all lost causes. Why fight when victory is impossible? Because someone has to, Park replied simply. Captain, humans learn something that most species never experience. Sometimes the only choice is between fighting and dying or surrendering and dying. When those are your options, you might as well take some enemies with you. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's communication system. Captain Chen's voice echoed through the corridors. All hands, prepare for emergency acceleration. We're receiving a priority distress signal. Zex 9 and Park rushed to the bridge, where they found the human crew already at battle stations. Captain Chan was standing at the central command console, her face grim. Captain Zex 9, she said as they entered, we're receiving a distress call from a council transport vessel. They're under attack by what appears to be the remainder of the Crimson Fleet. How many ships? 8 vessels, closing on the transport at coordinates Delta 79. The transport is carrying refugees from the Outer Rim colonies, including families with children. Zex 9 felt his mandibles click in frustration. 8 ships again. Captain Chun, we cannot continue to face impossible odds. Perhaps we should call for council reinforcements. Chun turned to look at him directly. Captain, the nearest council vessels are 6 hours away. Those refugees have maybe 30 minutes before the pirates overwhelm their defenses. Lieutenant Commander Park was already working at the tactical station. Captain, sensors show the transport has minimal defensive capabilities. They're completely helpless. Then, we go, Chun said without hesitation. Engineering, prepare for maximum slip space velocity. Tactical, ready all weapon systems. Communications, signal Captain Zex 9 that he can follow or return to council space, his choice. Zex 9 stared at her. Captain Chun, this is madness. We've already fought one impossible battle. Now you want to fight another. Chen's green eyes met his 4, and he saw something there that made him understand why humans had survived on a death world. It wasn't just determination or stubbornness. It was the absolute refusal to accept that some people didn't matter. Captain Zex 9, she said quietly, I have a daughter back on Earth. She's 7 years old, and she likes to draw pictures of starships. If she were on that transport, I would want someone to come for her, no matter the odds. But the logical choice would be to preserve our ships for future missions where we might save more lives. Logic is a luxury, Captain. Those refugees don't have time for us to make logical decisions. Chin turned back to her command console. We go. Now, as the defiant dawn accelerated toward the new crisis, Zex 9 made his decision. Commander Thale, set course to follow the humans. Maximum speed. Sir, Thale replied. Are you certain? We've been fortunate so far, but eventually our luck will run out. Zex 9 looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all looking at him with a mixture of loyalty and concern. Good beings, all of them, who had followed him into one impossible situation and were willing to follow him into another. Commander, he said finally, I've learned something from the humans. Luck has nothing to do with it. They don't win because they're lucky. They win because they refuse to lose. The battle, when it came, was different from the first one. The Crimson Fleet had learned from their previous encounter with human weapons and had modified their tactics accordingly. Instead of grouping together, they had spread out in a wide formation around the refugee transport, making it impossible to attack them all at once. Classic pincer formation, Commander Park observed from the tactical station. They're trying to force us to choose between protecting the transport and engaging their ships. Captain Chun studied the tactical display for a moment, then smiled. They still don't understand human military doctrine. We don't choose between protecting civilians and defeating enemies. We do both. She activated the ship's communication system. Captain Zex 9, I'm transmitting a tactical plan that's going to seem insane. I need you to trust me. The plan, when it arrived, was indeed insane. Chun wanted the Harmony's voice to position itself directly between the transport and the largest group of pirate ships, using its shields to absorb enemy fire while the Defiant Dawn attacked from the opposite direction. She wants us to use our ship as a shield, Commander Thale said quietly. We'll be taking fire from 6 ships simultaneously. Can our shields handle it? For a few minutes, maybe. Zex, 9 considered their options. The logical choice was to retreat and call for reinforcements. The practical choice was to try to negotiate with the pirates. The human choice was to put themselves between the pirates and the innocents, regardless of the cost. Do it, he ordered. What followed was the longest 10 minutes of Zex-9's life. The Harmony's voice absorbed hit after hit from pirate weapons, its shields flaring with each impact. On the main screen, he could see the refugee transport behind them, its hull packed with families who had already lost their homes and were now facing the possibility of losing their lives. Meanwhile, the Defiant Dawn tore through the pirate formation like a force of nature. Human weapons that could create artificial black holes and manipulate space-time itself reduced pirate ships to debris and exotic matter. But even human technology had limits, and they were facing too many enemies spread across too wide an area. Shield down to 15%, his engineer reported. We can't take much more of this. That's when Zex-9 saw something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. On the tactical display, the Defiant Dawn suddenly changed course, accelerating directly toward the largest pirate vessel. But instead of firing weapons, the human ship simply rammed into it. The two ships collided at a significant fraction of light speed, and both simply disintegrated in a flash of released energy that temporarily blinded the bridge's visual sensors. Captain Chun, Zex-9 shouted into the communication system, but there was no response. For a moment, the battle paused. Then, impossibly, a new contact appeared on sensors. The Defiant Dawn, battered and trailing atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches, was still intact and still fighting. Human engineering, Commander Thale whispered in amazement. They built their ship to survive ramming attacks. The remaining pirate ships, apparently as shocked as everyone else that the human vessel had survived the collision, began to retreat. But Chun wasn't done with them. All vessels in the area, her voice came over the general communication frequency. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force. Any ship that fires on civilians will be hunted down and destroyed. This is your only warning. The pirates fled into slip space, leaving behind the refugee transport, the 2 damaged warships, and the debris of their destroyed comrades. As rescue operations began, Zex-9 finally understood what made humans different. It wasn't their technology or their tactics or their physical capabilities. It was their complete inability to accept that anyone was beyond saving, that any fight was too costly, that any sacrifice was too great if it meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. They weren't warriors. They were guardians. And they had learned, on their death world, that sometimes being a guardian meant being willing to die rather than let anyone else suffer. 3 weeks after the second battle, Captain Zex-9 stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Council on the capital world of New Geneva. The massive amphitheater held representatives from 47 different species, all of them listening as he delivered his report on the Kepler 442b incident and its aftermath. And so, he concluded, the human vessel Defiant Dawn, despite being outnumbered 6-1, successfully eliminated the pirate threat and rescued 15,000 colonists with minimal casualties. The amphitheater erupted in murmurs and conversations in dozens of different languages. At the central podium, Council Leader Zirian of the Vegan Collective raised her bioluminescent hand for silence. Captain Zex-9, she said, her voice carrying through the chamber's translation system. Your report is remarkable. However, it raises serious concerns about human military capabilities and their willingness to engage in unsanctioned warfare. Zex-9 felt his mandibles click in frustration. With respect, Council Leader, the humans were responding to a legitimate distress call that other Council vessels chose to ignore. From the Andromedan section of the Assembly, Admiral Kor stood to speak. The issue is not whether their actions were justified, but whether they were authorized. Humans cannot simply take unilateral action whenever they disagree with Council decisions. And what about the 15,000 lives they saved? Zex-9 asked. Were we supposed to abandon them because helping would be inconvenient? Council Leader Zirian's bioluminescence shifted to a pattern that indicated displeasure. Captain Zex-9, you're out of order. This assembly is here to discuss appropriate responses to the human military actions, not to debate council policy. Then, perhaps it should be, a new voice said from the gallery. Every head in the amphitheater turned to see Captain Sarah Chun walking down the central aisle. She was still in her military uniform, which was unusual in the council chambers where most representatives wore formal civilian dress. Behind her walked a small delegation of humans, including Dr. Kim, Chief Martinez, and Lieutenant Commander Park. Captain Shun, Council Leader Zirian said, her bioluminescence shifting to surprise. You were not invited to address this assembly. No, Chin agreed. Reaching the central podium, I wasn't. But 15,000 civilians were attacked while the council debated logistics, so I thought perhaps formal invitations aren't the most important thing right now. She activated the central holographic display, showing images from Kepler 442b. The assembly watched in silence as scenes of destruction and rescue played across the massive screen. Honorable council members, Chun said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I want to show you what we found when we arrived at Kepler 442b. The images showed the aftermath of the pirate attack. Burning buildings, damaged infrastructure, and, most importantly, the faces of the survivors. Families huddled together in underground shelters. Children crying for parents who might never come home. Elderly beings too weak to evacuate on their own. These people sent a distress signal to the Galactic Council. They asked for help from the civilization they had trusted to protect them. And what did they receive? Chun changed the display to show the communication logs from the rescue operation. Debate about cost-effectiveness. Discussions about resource allocation. Concerns about jurisdiction and proper authorization. She looked around the amphitheater at the assembled representatives. While you were debating, they were dying. Admiral Kaur stood again. Captain Shun, the council cannot make decisions based solely on emotional appeals. We must consider the greater good. The greater good? Chen's voice rose slightly. Admiral, can you explain to me how abandoning civilians under attack serves the greater good? By preserving resources for situations where we can save more lives with less risk. Chen nodded slowly. I see. And who decides which lives are worth saving? Which risks are acceptable? Which costs are too high? The amphitheater had gone completely silent. Even the translation systems seemed to pause. Because from where I stand, Chen continued, it looks like the council has become very good at calculating the value of other people's lives, but not very good at actually saving them. Dr. Kim stepped forward to join Shun at the podium. Council members, I've spent the past 3 weeks treating refugees from the Outer Rim colonies. Do you know what they all have in common? She activated her medical scanner and projected the data holographically. Malnutrition, untreated injuries, psychological trauma from repeated attacks. These people have been calling for help for months, and their condition keeps getting worse because no help comes. Chief Martinez joined them next. The infrastructure data tells the same story. Mining colonies, research stations, agricultural settlements. All of them are falling apart because they can't get supplies or support through council bureaucracy. Meanwhile, pirates move freely because there are no patrols in the areas deemed too expensive to protect. Lieutenant Commander Park was the last to speak. The Crimson Fleet that attacked Kepler 442b had been raiding settlements for 2 years. Their tactics were predictable, their targets were obvious, and their capabilities were well within the range of standard council vessels to defeat. He changed the display to show tactical analyses. Every attack could have been prevented with minimal effort, but prevention would have required treating Outer Rim colonies as being just as important as core worlds. Council leader Zirian's bioluminescence had shifted to patterns Zex 9 had never seen before, suggesting emotions his translator couldn't interpret. Captain Shun, what exactly are you proposing? Shun looked around the amphitheater one more time, her green eyes meeting the gaze of representatives from dozens of species. I'm proposing that the council remember what it was created for. You weren't supposed to be accountants calculating the cost of compassion. You were supposed to be the best of all our civilizations, working together to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. She gestured to the images still playing on the display. These people trusted you. They believed that being part of galactic civilization meant something, that there were people who would come for them when everything went wrong. And when no one came, When everyone turned their backs, they learned that trust was misplaced. The silence in the amphitheater was profound. Zex, 9 could see representatives shifting uncomfortably, their various forms of body language all expressing the same emotion: shame. Director Vash, who had been sitting in the witness gallery, stood to speak. "If I may, Council Leader." Ziria nodded permission. "I was the administrator of Kepler 442b, Vash said, his chrome-like skin reflecting the amphitheater's lights. "When the attack began, I sent distress calls to every Council vessel in range. 23 ships received our plea for help. 22 calculated that we weren't worth saving." He gestured toward Chun and her delegation. "One ship, carrying beings from a species most of you consider barbaric primitives, dropped everything and came for us. They faced impossible odds without hesitation. They risked their lives for people they had never met, from species they owed nothing to." Vash's voice grew stronger. "Captain Chun is right. You have forgotten what the Council is supposed to be. But humanity remembers. They understand that civilization isn't about avoiding danger or calculating costs. It's about standing together when everything goes wrong." From his position in the Altarian section, Zex, 9 stood to speak. "Council Leader, I request permission to address the Assembly." "Granted, Captain." Zex, 9 walked down to join the humans at the central podium. "Honorable representatives, 3 weeks ago, I believed that humans were dangerous primitives who couldn't be trusted with galactic civilization. I was wrong." He activated his own holographic display, showing the tactical data from both rescue operations. "Humans are dangerous, but not to us. They're dangerous to anyone who would harm the innocent. They're dangerous to those who would prey on the weak. They're dangerous to pirates and slavers and anyone else who thinks some lives matter less than others." The display shifted to show images of human Marines caring for wounded civilians, human engineers rebuilding damaged infrastructure, human medical officers treating injuries regardless of species. But most importantly, Zex, 9 continued, "They remember what we have forgotten. That power without compassion is meaningless. That technology without empathy is worthless. That strength without the will to protect others is just another form of weakness." He turned to address the Assembly directly. "The humans didn't join the Council to conquer us or to impose their will. They joined because they believe that together we can be better than any of us are alone. But they also understand that together means everyone, including those in the Outer Rim colonies who aren't profitable enough to matter." Council Leader Zirian stood slowly. "What are you asking this Assembly to do?" Shin answered immediately. "Stop calculating the worth of lives. Start protecting them. All of them." She gestured to her delegation. "Humanity is prepared to lead by example. We're establishing permanent patrols in the Outer Rim systems. We're offering free medical and engineering support to any colony that needs it. We're creating a rapid response force that will answer any distress call, regardless of politics or jurisdiction. And if other council members want to help, they're welcome to join us. But if they don't, we'll do it ourselves. Because that's what our homeworld taught us. Someone has to stand guard. And if no one else will, then we will." The vote, when it came, was closer than Zex, 9 had expected. 24 species voted to support the new humanitarian mandate. 20 voted against it. 3 abstained. As the Assembly dispersed, Zex, 9 found himself walking beside Captain Chun toward the spaceport where their ships waited. "Captain," he said, "I owe you another apology. When I first met you, I thought humans were too violent for civilized space." Chun smiled. "And now? Now I understand that sometimes civilization needs violence. Not violence for its own sake, but violence in service of protecting those who cannot protect themselves." They paused at the spaceport entrance, where the Harmony's voice and the repaired Defiant Dawn sat side by side. "Captain Chun, Zex," 9 said formally, "the Altarian Republic would be honored to join your Outer Rim Patrol initiative. We'd be glad to have you, Captain. But I should warn you, it's going to be dangerous work. The Outer Rim is full of threats that prefer easy targets." Zex 9's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned to recognize as Altarian laughter. "Captain, I've learned something important from humanity. The universe is a dangerous place. But it's less dangerous when good people refuse to abandon each other." As their ships prepared for departure, Zex, 9 reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The Galactic Council was still struggling to remember its purpose, but at least some of its members had learned what humanity had always known, that civilization wasn't about avoiding conflict or calculating costs. It was about standing together when everything went wrong and making sure that no one faced the darkness alone. In the Outer Rim colonies, beings who had lost hope began to see ships on their sensors again. Ships that came not to calculate or debate, but to protect and serve. Ships crewed by humans and their allies who had learned that sometimes the most civilized thing you can do is refuse to be civilized when innocents are in danger. And in the deep space between the stars, pirates and slavers began to encounter something they hadn't expected. Beings who fought not for profit or territory, but for the simple principle that some things were worth protecting, no matter the cost. The galaxy was learning what humanity had always known, that when everyone else turns their backs, someone still has to step forward. And humans, children of a death world who had learned to survive by protecting each other, were very good at stepping forward.